Even though sustainability was in fashion for last 5 to 10 years, it was a buzzword. We saw a lot of people getting into sustainability, the brands and building awareness, talking about it. But from consumer was not really clear about what was sustainable. It's like we are saying, yeah, don't use plastic, but we don't know what plastics that we can recycle, what plastics that can that we stop consuming, right? So there's two angles. So consumers didn't know what exactly sustainability is. They know the word, they're aware of the word, but they're not they don't know in depth into it. What is really sustainability? Is it something made out of organic cotton, or is it something made by the local communities, right? So there's so many aspects of sustainability where consumers were a little bit struggling to identify. They were The other thing that I felt was, as a consumer, when I go to a shop and buy a garment, I did not connect to the bigger picture of climate change or environmental pollution when I was buying a garment.
Yes.
So that connection was never there, even though we knew what sustainability was.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the post-COVID, before the COVID hit us. So we are coming out after being home for 2 months, after being at lockdown for 2 months at home. I think we realized so many things, like, we started valuing what we have at home or what we've already purchased. Then we have to rationalize, we have to use whatever the food we have in a way that, we have no access to new products.
Yeah.
And then again, when you come about access, you have to kind of work around the things you have. You might not get luxury imports. So how do you kind of figure out your life, right?
Yeah.
You started making things on your own. You started mending things on your own. So so many consumers started figuring out how to do exercises, how to make food, the whole complete lifestyle change. So we're coming with a different consumer awareness, different consciousness. So now people this time really hit us, and now we kind of realize that, we kind of start connecting ourselves to the bigger picture, right? Whatever we do, it's not fashion. Whatever we do, it connects to the environment, it connects to the nature, and nature can give it back to us in a minute, like that. So the connection, I think the connection is much less than before. So I think that's where the opportunity lies. And taking Dinushi's question of how we influence, I mean, we've used so many methods of educating consumers on sustainability, but we couldn't make that connection. We couldn't bridge that connection between buying, that moment of buying, and connecting the garment to climate change.
To the bigger picture,
right? So that's where I think the COVID has made the influence, or the nature has made the influence for us more than ever. So that's, I think, the strong area for us to kind of look into.
So do you think because of this, people are going to be reading up more about making them more aware of the environment and how that connection happens from buying something to how it impacts the bigger picture? You think, of course, this is exaggerated it, right?
Yes. So I think that, I'll just put back my designer hat on and just explain how this really helps for us as a designer.
Yes, from a designer perspective, please.
Yeah, from a designer perspective, I mean, all this time as a designer, we try to give a product that look good on somebody, right?
Yes.
But it's not anymore a product that will look good on you. It has to be a product that helps someone else, helps the environment, helps how to dispose it. How can we make the consumer sustainable, right? It's a whole cycle that we have to create or design, not just a product that looks good. So that's something that designers must be aware of. And the other thing is quality, the value, the brand that you bring in, because people have so much time, all this time to go through brands and see what mistakes. I mean, they've been on internet, they're aware of it, they have time now, right? So you can't give anything crap anymore. You have time, they know. So I think quality, a value, as designers, we should start thinking what value we bring to in a product. Then the other thing is buy local, because I think consumers are asking for a shorter supply chain and more transparency. So for local designers, I think there's so much opportunity. So I think as it is putting my designer hat, I feel like I need to get back to work and start working. And
but you also must be as creative as you are. You must be itching to go back to your studio and get creative, because it's very difficult for all of you creative guys to be like hemmed into a box. So I'm sure you're very excited to go back and start creating some amazing stuff.
Exactly. So I think combining these two for designing, I mean, for us, what we've been doing is we've been taking time to understand what our strengths, what our competency, which is upcycling. So we are happy to see how we can broaden up our strengths. And definitely there is a need coming up and there's an opportunity to grab. So we are thinking, okay, let's start educating consumers in a different way. Start consumers to look at, I mean, we've been using post-consumer waste, but we are trying to go into their wardrobes and say, okay, start understanding what you have, what you purchase. Is there clothes that you haven't worn for the last 5 years, and why so, right? Let's give it a new look. So that's kind of the idea we are bringing in to as a brand, what we have our strengths, and we're trying to see how we can fit into the consumer needs.
That sounds absolutely exciting. Extremely, it's going to be also extremely rewarding for you as a brand when you make this kind of changes, not about just giving a beautiful product, but when you're making such a conscious decision to go into that supply chain like that, you're really, really making a difference. So that has to be extremely rewarding as well.
It's fun. I call it fun.
Thank you so much. We'll have further questions for you, but for the moment, we're going to go on to the next panelist, Darshi, and we're going to talk about, you mentioned about, Lonali, how you have to rethink and how you have to rethink your resources as well. So I'm going to direct my next question towards Darshi, because I think it could be a nice link about when we're talking about how we design and how we need to now use our resources in a much more effective way. And Darshi, who's an extremely senior designer as well, I'd like to ask you this question. Darshi, in this time now, how are you going to use your resources in a much more effective way? Darshi, on mute still.
Oh, I'm on mute.
No, you're not. Great.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. So since we started our sustainable journey a while back, as a part of it, we wanted to use our resources efficiently. So this has been a part of our journey at the moment, and the COVID crisis has made us all realize it's given us an opportunity to be more resourceful, or more to use the resources efficiently. We looked at our resources always in like 3 categories: product, human, and environment. Talking about product, it's we've always been trying for a while now to be a zero waste, circular economy company. It's progress, not perfection. We haven't perfected it yet.
Yes, but these things are always a huge work in progress. It's very time consuming, so you can't get it in day one.
But we try. So for example, we use our off-cut fabrics. We try to as a product efficiency, we try to use all the fabrics that we make without wasting it.
Yes.
So we try to upcycle it by collaborating with like-minded brands like Cantala, who we work with, creating lovely bags, partly using batik, and then other companies like Salvage and various other places. So we try to maximize what we can get with the fabrics that we have. And for human efficiency, we try to multi-skill our staff. So that way, you know, for example, our current pattern maker joined us over 8 years ago as a machine operator, but she has always been interested in pattern making. So we gave training in pattern making, so she can make our patterns now. And currently we are skilling her to be on quality checks as well. So we'd like—
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, they're also more interested in their job because they don't get bored with what they're doing. And also we get the maximum out of, you know, like efficiency with one person. So and then they get training in other skills also. So it helps both parties. So that's, that's as per human efficiency, how we maximize it. And for environmental, we've changed to reactive dyes. We try to use more biodegradable dyes. This is also a journey that we have started on. We also are talking to—
Explain a little bit more to us what a reactive dye is.
Oh, okay. So the chemicals in that are like more it's more biodegradable, and then it's not harmful for the environment. It dissolves in the environment, whereas some of the chemicals used in the past for batik or any other textile industry could be more harmful for the environment or carcinogenic. So that is something that we try to avoid and using, and share these details with other people, also the people in the batik industry, because I think it's a responsibility for all of us.
Yes.
So we try to create efficiency there from that. And then we also look at, right now I'm talking to a supplier trying to use pea silk, because then it's a kind of version of silk. And also fabrics like bamboo fabric made out of bamboo and hemp. They're more environmentally friendly, eco-friendly. So we try to use that, and we try to be innovative with, you know, what we give to the customer, also the choice. Then, you know, they are also aware of it, and they can pick what they like. So those are the 3 areas that we looked at: product, human, and environment. So that is the question.
That sounds really interesting and amazing, that you have to manage all of that. And then, you know, now it's like even more important that you have to manage these resources really effectively. Talking a little bit more about the human element, you mentioned, as that is obviously a huge part of the resources, and without our teams, we are nothing. So how do you empower the artisans when it comes to your studio at Buddhi Batiks? Because you need to also empower them, but also, you know, there's this element of how do you, you know, keep the quality standards up of your brand as well. So it's always a little bit, you know, we need to be encouraging, but also how do you keep the standard up as, you know, the creative director? Could you tell us a little bit more how you do that?
So again, on empowering artisans and empowering our business together with them, we have looked at 3 different areas. So social empowerment, and personally empowering them, and financial empowerment. So when I say these are the 3 areas that we have looked at, so social environment, it is to basically let them also understand their value as craft artisans, what they do. You know, creating a piece of batik art is, in the past, I know there wasn't value. There was only like material value, like, you know, okay, you use the fabric, you use the dye, so then they would calculate the price of that, but they would never calculate their, or rather value their artisan skills.
Yes.
So it's important for them also to realize, and then also the consumer also to realize what goes into it. So we try to, through social media, we try to talk about what they do. So empowering them socially like that. So And personal is, like I was saying earlier, training, and then multi-skilling them. Multi-skilling is very important, because then they can, one day, they would be with us, and one day when they leave, they can have their own business. You progress sometime, right? Like, you need to progress from one to the other. So it's important that for us that we encourage them for continuous learning. So that way, when they learn, when they share their knowledge with us, it's good. It's mutually beneficial for both. We try to empower them personally through educational learning. Then financially, we try to pay them above average for the batik industry, and we help them with their healthcare, such things. Financially, we empower them. So that is how we empower the artisans.
Yeah.
Encourage, like, for example, like our work in our workshop, the lunchtime is an hour at least, because then we can go home, feed the kids, because they live all close by to us and to the workshop. So it's very important for us that they have that freedom also. They have the time, and then we encourage older people to work with like flexible time. We have people who's like started as like just school leaver to like even now retired, but still, when they like to come and work, which gives them an income, as well as it's great for us because their knowledge is very valuable. And then through that, obviously team activities, things we try to empower them.
So they sound like they're going to be an extremely happy bunch to be working with you and working for you. So you've structured in a very nice way for them to feel empowered. And I suppose if you are doing very well and you're multi-skilled and happy to do it, you will also then make it much easier for the quality of your brand to be at a certain level as well, right? So it doesn't seem like it's imposed. I feel like the way you're empowering your team, they will do it even though you don't have to like make it a rule almost. It'll come from them. What do you think? Is that's kind of my interpretation? Or
we wanted to understand that. We always talk within our team that sustainability, or rather the way, more, I'm not trying to greenwash, obviously. It's a progress in progress, like I was telling you earlier. And it's great that we're talking about these topics, but always we try to, at Buddhi Batiks, this should be the philosophy that we live through, or rather work through it, not just a business consideration.
Yes,
it's important to us, so the team also knows that, and like we try to do it as a practice of the way we do things, not as just as a business consideration.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. And I think, Binu, I'm going to start directing some questions at you now, because we've had Lonali talk about, how consumers need to make better choices, and then how it's led to designers. So it's quite interesting to understand, like, sustainability is a hot topic, and right now we have to be even more conscious. So we understand that now consumers are going to be demanding more, as Lonali mentioned. They're going to be asking for more value. And then as designers going to be doing a lot more to bring in this value, then it could be interesting to understand. So now as a retailer, as the design collective, as retailers, we hold a responsibility to the consumer. So how would you say that you are tackling this?
Okay, so very true to what you said, that we definitely have a certain amount of responsibility to the consumer as well as to the designer and the overall movement of sustainability.
Absolutely.
So I would like to break it down to, let's say, what we are currently doing and what we are hoping to do. Mm-hmm. So in terms of what we are currently doing, so I'll again break it down to 3 points. So the first point that I'd like to talk about is about education. So something that we have done from the store itself is that from time to time, we've had workshops and panel discussions where, like, let's say, for example, for workshops, we've had designers come down who talk about different techniques, something unique, something different to bring to the table. Like, for example, the workshop that we did with button masala. So the designer Anuj Sharma has this technique where he uses buttons, rubber bands, and any form of fabric, and he makes garments without even having one single stitch. So which is quite different and unique. So these are different techniques that you bring to the table. But at the same time, through the panel discussions that we have had, let's say, Nivi, who's the founder of Ikivi, which is an online platform that has only sustainable brands. Mm-hmm. But she's based out of India, and she basically had a panel discussion with us, spoke to the designers as well as some of our consumers, and kind of educated them as to how sustainability is growing and what kind of a stage that sustainability is at in India. So which is also a large market. And if we can see the kind of change that's happening there, I think we can definitely adapt to that as well.
Yes.
So let's say my point 2 would be basically about, let's say, about our own website, where we have now given a separate section altogether for sustainable brands. So what what our vision from the store is that we want to make sure that the sustainable brands have a section. The consumers who come on the platform understand that sustainability is, it's important to even have a section. So that's what I'm trying to make a point at. And also I want the consumers to understand these are the brands who are following this. So to give more emphasis on the brands as well as make the consumers familiar with these brands. Then my point 3, I would say, would be, basically what we ourselves would do. Now, for example, let's say wearing the same thing multiple times. The funny story is I've been photographed on High Magazine twice or thrice wearing the same outfit. I think Shahili's been photographed as so I think you wore it for Colombo Fashion Week itself.
Yes, yeah. So, I reuse the same stuff. People think I have the same clothes. It's brilliant.
And the other thing is, it's not that we don't purchase, but it's just that we also make the point to rewear, reuse, make good use out of it, style it in different ways. The same outfit can be styled in so many different ways. Just maybe accessorize, put a scarf on, like different things. So I'd say those are my 3 points as to what we are currently doing. And then let's say going more towards the future, what we want to do is that, so we've started in a small way, let's say my point 1 would be, again, in a small way at Edit, which is our second store, which is on Rossmith Place. We've basically done a small section which is completely dedicated for sustainable brands. But obviously it's a very, very small section which we started as a trial period. Definitely after the COVID, we were hoping to kind of get things going, but with everything happening, we weren't able to launch it properly or anything like that. But it's a space that has been created. But our vision at the moment is to eventually make this space a sustainable store. So it will cater to brands. And also what we want to do is, because what happens is that when we have a store that has multiple brands, it kind of dilutes and kind of says, okay, we can't give enough emphasis to overall cause of, let's say, overall getting the sustainability, the message out, I would say.
Yes. So, and Lonali mentioned it is quite overwhelming for the consumer. And they cannot understand from buying that good what impact they have in the big picture. So I understand that. So I think making a space for that kind of, 1, we're giving emphasis to it. 2, we're promoting the brands. 3, we're also kind of educating the consumer about this more and more. Yes.
So I would say, eventually this store will become that, but obviously it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get there. So another,
like you mentioned, these things don't happen overnight. It's all about progress.
So my point 2 would be basically collaborations between, I think as Design Collective, when we started as well, what we wanted to promote was collaboration. So in terms of collaborations, what I want to do is for sustainable brands to collaborate amongst themselves, but at the same time for sustainable brands to collaborate with other brands who are not working in the same sustainability angle. But what I want them to do is, in maybe a small way, start with maybe you can have a capsule collection, or you can have a couple of pieces, or just start in a small way, and then eventually they can progress. They can decide if they want to progress or not, but we're at least pushing them in that direction.
And so that they can learn from each other. Yes.
Exactly. So like you said, learn from each other.
Yeah, but we've got great examples of that. Darshi mentioned the Kantala with the Batiks project, which is again 2 brands at the store which are collaborating. And again, Darshi and Anuj
exactly.
So there are many of these. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. So my point number 3 is that as an overall retailer, what we are also trying to do is to kind of create a blueprint where obviously we can't change overnight, but what we are trying to do is we're trying to do little things that will accumulate to a much larger picture eventually. We're looking at maybe doing it in the next couple of years and slowly moving towards that. And also while we are moving towards that, what we also want to do is we want to take our 60 plus designers who are present at Design Collective along on that same road.
Yeah.
So I think that's, our overall perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting point, Vince. You mentioned that, it's not about just having some extremely hero sustainable brands, because Darshi mentioned about giving that natural dye process and suppliers to other people in the batik industry. How she mentioned that the whole industry actually needs to move. And then you mentioned it's not just about a couple of designers moving forward, but it's actually everybody in the industry moving forward. And I think that's the only way we can all really contribute and make a difference. You mentioned also a couple of collaborations, and I mentioned obviously the ones we've recently been talking about, the one with Anuj and the one with Kantala. But are there any more collaborations that you have in the plan that you want to discuss?
So the most recent collaboration, I would say, is this is something that we are hoping to do as a store itself. It's not just with 1 or 2 designers. It's basically for any designer who's keen to do this. It's basically going to be called the Timeless Sari project. So it's basically, it's like the Timeless Sari, where you kind of, all the designers can create this sari that can be worn multiple times, can be worn to multiple occasions. It can be, the sky is the limit when it comes to what this can be. How you define this can be as per that particular designer. But what we want to do out of it is that it should be that timeless piece that is in your wardrobe that you can tell everybody saying you've worn it to death, you've worn it to multiple places, and kind of reused and re-worn as many times as you can.
Yeah, and it'll be everybody's interpretation of what timeless means.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really, really good. Thank you so much, Binu. I'm sure we'll have further questions, but due to time, I'm going to now start directing my questions towards Fazeena. Fazeena, you're the CEO of Colombo Fashion Week, and all of us have been one of your stakeholders at any given time. And I know just from a retail perspective how annoying myself and Binu can be during your crazy time period at Colombo Fashion Week, but also throughout the year. And then we have designers here with us who also work with you, but you have so many stakeholders that you need to manage. So how do you align all of us towards this one common goal of working towards a more sustainable future? So how do you manage this?
Thanks, Shahili, for that. Let me first start with possibly saying where we are today with sustainability amidst this COVID. I personally feel the lockdown has given us a great opportunity to reinvent and reset fashion. The entire industry was driven by deep discounting, and it was completely burdened. And we've been leading consumers blindly towards hyperconsumption.
Yes.
Knowingly, unknowingly, this has been driven by big organizations and encouraging people to buy lots and lots of clothes with discounted items. I think we are in a good position to reset that. It almost makes you wonder what happened to that relationship between the garment and the designer and the consumer. It's almost lost there. There's no value in what you create anymore. So what we really wanted to do, I think the virus has helped us done to see the optimistic side of things. So I think it's a perfect time for designers to find their identity and engage with that consumer. This is that time to strengthen your point of view. So there's no better time for a collective clean slate, as we call it. As a body, Colombo Fashion Week, we develop creative talent, we educate, and we showcase. So we've been in the responsibility of fashion for quite some time now. We've done it in many ways, launching the responsible movement. We've had many seminars, talks, bringing in thought leadership and creating that awareness in sustainability. So there was a time, I believe, where everyone thought, yes, a shift has to be made, but very seldom did the shift happen. So our role in the industry is actually to make sure this shift is directed in the right direction, and also convince people that it is a necessity. Absolutely. So how if you ask me, how do we bring all of these together? We continue to do this, and how we've done it is addressing all of the stakeholders in the system. The designers, how they rethink fashion, how they address the whole process, the supply chain, and also finally the most important part, the consumers. How do we connect with all of them to make sure they know what needs to be done to be sustainable? So a week before we went into this lockdown, we were all set to launch a cutting-edge scoring system. Sharika very much knows about it as well. This system connects the designer to the consumer in many different levels, creating accountability and transparency. The need to give an actionable direction to the designer and the consumer is what prompted this whole system. Okay. So it's called the responsible meter. It's a scoring system that guides anyone who's part of it, who's pledged it, like a designer, to understand the responsible journey of the garment.
So when you tell me that it's almost like a scoring system and like quite point-based, will you be able to tell me what is the criteria in the scoring system?
Yes, there's a 10-point scoring system. So to break it down further, this brings to light the design process. The whole scoring system brings to light the design process, how people consume, the production, and finally the disposal plan of the garment. So in short, it understands the journey of the responsible journey of the garment from the beginning to the end. Yeah. So how do we derive this system? It of course is a lengthy process, but if I'm to explain to you in a nutshell, there are 3 broad categories that define the 10 different aspects, the 10 different points, right? So to start with, it addresses the environmental well-being, societal well-being, and organizational well-being. So everything that we all talk about in terms of sustainability, inculcated, narrowed down into these 10 points. Yeah. So that is me telling you in a small way, because we also focus more actionable pillars around circularity. The system has what you call 3 pillars that we talk about, right? It's garment enhancement policy. We have a return after use policy, and we also have a considerable disposable plan. So this whole system brings together and streamlines what the designer needs to do, what the stakeholder needs to do, or the supply chain, and what the consumer needs to understand. It simplifies it and brings us all to one point.
Oh, wow. So this is like very important as to why we need to have this, like.
Why you need to have the responsible meter.
Yeah.
Yes. a lot of work and information has gone into creating this system, right? For a supply chain to be progressive, for a responsible supply chain to be progressive, we need an ecosystem to work with.
Absolutely.
An ecosystem that encourages good consumption, builds a culture of consuming and appreciating responsible design. The work that designers like Lonali and Darshi are putting in needs to be appreciated, and this meter helps facilitate that environment. And
Absolutely.
also, sorry.
Absolutely. We need to.
The meter also helps the designers reach their sustainable goals, because it's not today they decide to be sustainable, tomorrow they can achieve it. It's a phase by phase process where they understand themselves. So this gives them a good guideline, and the 10 different points come from various different aspects of sustainability, right? So this gives them a good guideline to what they can achieve in every phase. So it gives, so I think it's quite important to have.
Absolutely. Also, Binu mentioned that the design collective is trying to formulate this blueprint where they can roll out to different designers, because everyone at the design collective are at different business life cycles. And here you mentioned like 10 points and how it's a phase, like, because everyone can't get to it at the same time. So it's very, very interesting to see that this is already something that you guys are already working on, and retailers are thinking as well, saying, okay, we need to have this blueprint. So it's amazing that now we can collaborate and work together, because everyone understands how important it is. But the importance is this quantifiable measure, how you talk about it. Having the meter, having this core system, and how it's really important. Now, I can see how it's really important for us as a retailer, how we can empower designers to progress and learn more. And it'll help them to also understand from their supply chain point of view. But how do we now make sure that the consumers also understand this? So I can see how designers will come on board very quickly, and retailers also understand the value. But how are you planning to get consumers on board, or for them to understand why the responsible meter is going to be equally important?
Yes, the designers and the stakeholders and the supply chain they're already part of the system. They've been with us, they've been part of it, they've pledged to be part of it. The consumer, however, is really key, and they're the lifeline of this system. Because without them prompting to wanting to buy the right thing, it's impossible for the designer or the retailer to function, right? So each garment, so what happens is, once the designer pledges to be part of the system, each garment of theirs will carry this meter. It's a little tag that informs what point number 1, 2, and 3 mean. So example, garment A will have 1, 2, and 4 as the transparency and the journey of that garment. Mm-hmm. And garment number 2 will have, say, points 7, 8, and 6. So this dialogue with the consumer is what is so crucial to this system, because they become aware, they know what they're buying, and they become conscious consumers, which is the ecosystem that we all plan to develop, which I spoke about earlier. So it all dovetails into what we want to create and the system we want to move forward with.
That's amazing. I really hope that we're all able to work towards this incredible goal that what you guys are working on, and to be really part of it as well.
Yes. Of course, we're very excited to launch it, because it's multi-pronged. It is for everyone in the system. In other countries, these things are not. We are the first to launch it. We're proud to say we're the first to launch it in the world, a system that is so cutting edge. There's so much knowledge that's gone into it, and maybe one of the reasons that other countries haven't done it is because it really costs. And someone like Sharika would be more aware and be able to tell you how bringing this information together and be able to streamline this it takes a lot. But we've been able to do it to make sure that we drive it for the entire country and the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Faz.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to start asking and directing some questions at Sharika. Sharika, you're the head of environmental sustainability at MAS Holdings. So I'm going to ask you some questions which are more industry related. So could you please tell us, like, what are the big players doing in the market right now? So from a global perspective, so in your industry, but from a more global perspective.
Shahili. So I think Fazeena's conversation segues quite nicely into what I can share in terms of what's happening internationally. So if I was to just step back and talk about in terms of history and the Sri Lankan industry, the apparel industry from a manufacturer perspective, everybody was into, even 10 years ago, there was an absolute passion for us to come forward. Like, for example, in Sri Lanka, we were the first in the world to create a green manufacturing facility. We were the first to have carbon neutral, first to have LEED platinum, and there was all this excitement. But what was difficult for us was to say, how sustainable are you compared to everybody else, right? And that's when we saw this movement creating about 5-6 years ago. One of the movements which we're a part of, and a lot of the major brands we work with are a part of, is called the Sustainable Apparel Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to what we see like in the responsible fashion meter, there's a slightly more technical, sophisticated version where brands and manufacturers are coming together and saying, look, let's agree on the criteria that we're going to go forward to, and let's agree how we're going to score them and agree on how we're going to verify them. So what we saw in the past was people, you know, pulling at manufacturers in every direction, whatever the brand felt like. But now, I mean, the word that's been used on the panel here is collaborative approach, and I think that's exactly what we have here. That now there's sort of a method to this madness, and it also helps us to move towards a goal and not be taken by surprise every time. So it's not just, I mean, we have a few more technical forums, like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition has it for factories, for designers, for other areas, but Darshi was talking about the chemical piece. So internationally, what we have is we have associations called the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals. And in this forum, we agree to which are the priority chemicals we're going to get rid of in our manufacturing process. So again, we see the whole international industry moving in a similar direction. So that helps us, I think, in terms of impact. It helps us in terms of innovation, finding the solutions. So that's just a little bit in the direction of where we're moving internationally.
I'm very familiar with all the work, amazing work that MAS does, but just for the discussion, I'm going to ask a little bit more in terms of what you guys do specifically in the front of sustainability and also innovation in this area.
Sure. So let me talk about 2 examples because I think let's kind of keep it in terms of what people can relate to. So I think one example of that MAS really took seriously was the area of waste. And we started quite simply. You know, the first thing that we needed to do was to make sure that we were tracking every single type of waste that we were creating in our organization. And that was actually quite a tough task. And once you have that information, finding a solution for each of those areas actually becomes a lot easier. And while we were doing this for ourselves, another sort of idea or another project came our way, which also led to scale. So one project was that, well, we didn't realize it would be a project. We had a request from one of our senior directors as he was walking down trails, and he said, hey guys, there's loads of plastic. MAS cannot pretend like we can't see all of this waste. We have to do something about it. And so he happened to be walking close to the Navy, and we connected with the Navy. So again, we use that same scientific approach where we said, okay, what are we dealing with in terms of what is all this waste? And when we went to a bunch of naval camps and collected and looked at what was being coming onto our coastline, we realized the majority of it was PET waste. And we started thinking about what are the innovations around PET or PET waste that we can do. And we realized that so if you want to bring it closer to home, what's polyester made out of? What is you know, how do we use this? And then we, again, I love this word collaboration we've used all day. We went to a recycling partner who was so excited about trying to connect this, make a yarn out of it. But what I must say is that every step in the manufacturing process, whatever we try to do, we try to make sure that the quality in which that we're creating it is equal or better than what we're trying to create it for. And it can't be at a price that is crazy, because that doesn't work in the type of scale that we want it to work in. And I always use the Tesla case, right? For example, there were tons of eco cars, nobody wanted them, but if you don't compromise on design and performance, everybody's happy to go down the sustainable path. So with that, we created, with collaboration of all parties, created a recycled yarn out of waste that was completely traceable off our own island. Nobody else in the world was doing this. And we launched it for the first time also with the Sri Lanka cricket jersey. So, I mean, that's just an example of the type of innovation that's coming out of Sri Lanka. And one other area, which I don't think anyone has been touching on recently that MAS has done, is we've really worked a lot on biodiversity. And I feel that a lot of people have kept biodiversity out of their agenda in the past. But we've just seen in August last year, the G7 Pact, where they've talked about emissions, oceans, and biodiversity as key for us in terms of progress. So that's another area, again, we started working on in 2016, actually generating more than up to date over 2,000 acres of restoring habitat. But that wasn't a direct business benefit for us. But we feel that there was a significant importance in all the other ecosystem services that we felt we needed to invest in so that we can protect. So it's a slightly different angle.
But also with all the amazing work that MAS is doing, and I'm sure all of the big players in Sri Lanka are also doing like similar things, I think you guys will be able to really make Sri Lanka like an amazing hub for manufacturing, for sustainability. Do you think that everyone doing all of this incredible work in this area will also encourage people to think of Sri Lanka as a place that they would like to work with and get things manufactured if we are all aligned as an industry?
Almost definitely, because given the type of platforms that we're on, the international platforms, I think over and over again we keep hearing Sri Lanka is one of the most ethical sourcing destinations. And they know, look, like if it's a manufacturing facility in Sri Lanka, we know we don't need to worry because you guys are generally 2 steps ahead of everybody else in terms of environment and social. So we keep hearing this. And we also keep wanting to share whatever we're doing within the industry or with anybody in the industry. We share our guidebooks, we share our experience, because we believe that this is not a journey you want to go alone. Everybody's got to move to this. Sri Lanka definitely has been definitely recognized as one of the most responsible and ethical manufacturers.
That's so great to hear. So guys, we're going to wrap up everyone's individual questions. And now I can see on our chat, we've got like some very specific questions for you guys from our viewers. So I'm going to start reading a few and directing them at you guys, if that's okay. So we have one question in front, and this is actually towards Fazeena. Do you think Sri Lanka is ready for a shift to a sustainable future?
Well, in my opinion, I would say Sri Lanka is quite ready. We have a culture of circularity. The whole concept of hyperconsumption did not stem from an island like Sri Lanka or this part of the world. So we are not the epicenter of that problem. So we are in a good position that, considering the mindset of the consumer, who think of reuse and reworking and living consciously, we're a step ahead there. when you look at the designers, most of them work really well with our crafts. We have so many indigenous crafts in Sri Lanka, and they look at supporting, developing, and almost championing in that area. So that's an area that we're already working very well with. Then you've just heard Sharika speaking about our manufacturing strength. We are ahead of a lot of others in the world. So if you're asking we're ready, I'd say yes, we are ready. And more than that, I'd say we are really poised to be the forefront and forerunners in this area. So we are good to take the lead in the system as opposed to follow anyone else.
That's so great to hear. And like, as Sharika mentioned, what's super interesting to know and understand is that from the manufacturing perspective, Sri Lanka has always done way more when it wasn't even asked. They've always, from an MAS perspective, I can say they've always looked after their people very well. They've always, done all of these things, doing the green factory in Thuruli and all of these things. It was done way in advance before it was demanded by people. So like Faz, as you mentioned, I think we are in the forefront, and we can be even more geared up now as more people are aware of what's happening and read more and learn.
And that's exactly what we want the responsible meter to do, bring all of these information and partners in the system so it directs everyone together to make that leap. And I think we are in a good place to start there.
That is very good to hear. We have a question at Sharika. So this is from Minuri. So this is a question, and I'm going to read it out. For those of you in the textile manufacturing industry, how do you juggle meeting expectations for low-cost brands in the fast fashion industry like H&M and Zara, and honoring your sustainability practices?
Well, I think it was a lot more challenging in the past when everybody was pulling us in different directions. But I was just sharing earlier that a lot of these brands, including H&M, Zara, and a lot of the other brands, are now coming and agreeing to what are going to be the consolidated standards that we are all going to do. In that case, from a cost perspective, if this is where the industry is moving to, it's something you'd have to do if you want to stay in manufacturing. But it only becomes unsustainable when we're doing little bits for everybody. So yeah, to a certain extent, if everybody's requiring the same sort of requirement, and it's a part of your strategy, and you're not just trying to rush and catch up with something and do it, and if it's something you've been doing for a while, I think it makes business sense. And they will always reward you with volume if you're able to have all of that compliance.
Thank you so much. Then I think this is a question towards Darshi or Lonali, because I think it's related to a designer perspective. So we have a question from Sashi. She would like to know, when it comes to sourcing material and sourcing raw materials, how do you do it in the most sustainable manner? Darshi on mute still.
Yeah, so I'll start and then Lonali can also reply that. So sustainable sourcing is very important because, like I was saying earlier, for dyes, it's very important in batik industry. So like that, even fabric, where it's coming from, or that it is manufactured with the right chemicals, and also who's making it and how are they treated, or things like that. So, you have to look at it from a full holistic point of view. So for us, it's very important, as much as we can, we try to get sustainably sourced material. I mean, obviously, again, we are trying our best. Yeah. But now there are more resources being available, or the knowledge is more in locally and overseas also. for us to source it in such manner.
Lonali?
So I also think like in Sri Lanka, we have very limited raw material wise. We don't grow cotton. We don't grow most of the fibers here in Sri Lanka. So therefore we have to look outside. But the best part is technology is such, there's so much out there. There's leather made out of apple to pineapple to all the raw material is like the innovations are out there if you want to get hold of. But it's a little tough when it's a small designer. But I think it's something doable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like we can see that now there are some amazing cotton t-shirts made out of seaweed. So, you know, there are so many things happening in this forefront. And it's technology is going to help. Thank you for that. There's now a question to Binu, which is about when the design collective is creating the sustainable area, which is on the website under sustainability and also in our store, how do we rather assess this product? How do we assess it, whether it comes in the sustainable category?
Okay, so we have a few criteria that we put together. So I'm just going to say what the criteria are. So one is basically, it doesn't have to comply by every single one of these criteria. And we understand that that's not going to happen. But it needs to at least have at least 1 to 2 of these things, but in a very prominent way. So one of it would be, let's say, handcrafted, so artisanal. It needs to be something related to that. It can be, let's say, organic or very environmental friendly. Also looking at, like, let's say, fair practices, like the fair trade practices that are there in the guidelines. Then minimum waste, that's really important as well. You know, anything that you use, let's say, local and traditional techniques, and obviously added this thing of it being vegan. So I would say these are some of the criteria that we look into. And if your brand basically complies by some of these aspects, we are definitely looking at those brands.
Okay. So again, this is interesting how Fazeena mentioned there are 10 points, but then all of these brands are not going to tick off all 10. We just need to understand what is this criteria, and hopefully we'll be able to push this, what the criteria is, to everybody, and then they'll be able to understand, okay, this brand is ticking off point 1, 2, and 3, or 4, 5, and 6, etc. Okay, thank you so much for that, Binu. Then we have another question. Actually, no. I think we have answered everything, but Shyam, is there anything else you would like to send us?
That's it, Shahili. There isn't any more questions from anyone, unless anyone else has a question they would like the panel to answer right now.
If anyone's wondering, this dress is from Buddhi Batiks.
Well, I guess we can wrap up then, Shahili.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much. It was a great learning experience for myself. It was really, really fun to talk to everybody. And I hope you enjoyed your time. Thank you again, Shyam and the Cosmo team, for hosting us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Everyone.